And welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Popiden, and this is Fermenting Opinions, the podcast in search of a more palatable political ferment. It's pretty damn unlikely today, given the news and why we're all here. Oh, I got you on. Let me mute you real quick there, Warren. Got some feedback there. Anyway, today is June 26, 2022. We are here about 2 days after the Supreme Court released their decision in Dobbs v. Jackson overturning Roe versus Wade. This is something that everybody in America and pretty much the rest of the world is aware of right now. And we are here to discuss basically what that means with regards to the decision itself in terms of what your rights are or will be state by state, and what, if anything, we're going to do about it. So first of all, I wanted to welcome everybody who's joined. We've got Warren, RJ, and Haley all the way over there from Sweden. Thank you for joining. My wonderful and talented girlfriend, Janie, is here as well. Thank you for joining. There were some other women who wanted to participate and were unable to at this time for a variety of reasons. I wanted to hold space for female voices right now, especially. Didn't work out as well as I wanted to, but this is familiar because the last one we did when the Alito, the brief was leaked, we had the same sort of situation. So we know what's going on. I hope people are engaged in self-care right now by either not doing stuff like this if you don't feel like you're able to, and by not getting into fights with people on social media because they're here for your misery. So don't give it to them. That said, do we want to go over briefly what the official holding is in Dobbs v. Jackson, especially if either of our barristers want to jump in on that?
As one of the fellow barristers, I have a 2-month-old. So I'm going to pass it to RJ. Let's let a man cover this.
Please, yeah, let's mansplain it for us, RJ. Thank you.
Yeah, so the actual holding itself is fractured, but the majority opinion did have 5 votes for it. Those were all of the so-called conservative justices minus Chief Justice Roberts.
Mm-hmm.
That majority opinion held in a case in Mississippi that had passed a law that allowed abortions only up until the 15th week of pregnancy, which did not work under the structure of Roe. Roe limited abortion. You could not make abortion legal or illegal until after viability, which is normally 23 or 24 weeks. This Mississippi law was passed, like many of these laws have been over the years, specifically to challenge Roe versus Wade, but in an incremental way, which was how everyone expected this to eventually happen. The idea being that normally the Supreme Court would say, okay, we have a law before us that limits abortions to they're illegal after the 15th week of pregnancy. That is either going to be constitutional or not. This opinion went much further than that and struck down Roe versus Wade and its progeny, specifically Casey versus Planned Parenthood, which was a 1992 case out of Pennsylvania, which sort of gave more definition to what Roe meant. So the majority opinion had 5 votes. That is now the law of the land. Roe versus Wade is no longer the law, and individual states can pass their own laws regarding abortion, which the only limitation that I'm aware of from the majority opinion is that Justice Alito's opinion suggested that a law that didn't allow for abortions to protect the life of the mother would be unconstitutional. So you couldn't have a full flat ban. But there are definitely laws out there that do not contain exceptions for things like rape or incest. 13 states had what are so-called trigger laws, which have been passed since 1973, saying if Roe is ever invalidated, which it was on Friday, these laws go into effect. Some of those go into effect after 30 days. Texas and Louisiana's are both in effect immediately upon Roe being.
I think Arkansas is
validated.
as well. I think I saw that yesterday.
Okay, that may be. I know
Yeah.
that Texas and Louisiana were effective at 10:19 on Friday morning.
For sure.
There's some of the trigger stuff in Texas, at least, is 30 days as well. Like it's going to be a felony for a woman to get an abortion in 28 days in Texas.
Right. Well,
so I also know it's going to be a felony for a doctor to perform the procedure, and they're subject to life imprisonment. That goes into effect in 28 days.
Yeah, Ken Paxton came out, the Attorney General of Texas, and said, as of Friday, it is illegal to perform an abortion in Texas. And I know that there are clinics in Texas that like in Houston, that canceled all appointments for abortions, saying we can't. Not that day, because they did some before 10:19 in the morning or 9:19 in the morning.
Gotcha.
And then they had to cancel them after that. So that's the majority opinion. The dissenting opinion is by the 3 so-called liberal justices. They were apoplectic, of course. They had a lot of different reasons for why this is a stupid decision. And that's to be expected. That means a dissenting opinion over something that was a 50-year-long precedent. Also, kind of uniquely, it's very rare for the court to grant or acknowledge a right and then later to rescind it. The only times that ever really happens are by things that we would consider really negative. Like, for example, the Supreme Court it was a constitutional amendment, took away the right of white people to own black people, right?
That's true. That was a right.
Right. We consider that like a positive development. But normally you don't have a right to something like bodily autonomy then taken away later.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a unique effect of the law or of this decision. In the middle, it was a 5-1-3 decision. Some people were reporting it as a 6-3, but
which initially that's what we thought it was 6-3, but Roberts did his own. What does that mean? So when you see something that's
when you don't join an opinion, what it means is there are sometimes these really fractured Supreme Court opinions where you'll have like 7 published opinions and none of them get more than 3 votes. And so therefore no new law is actually ever established because a majority of the Supreme Court didn't join a holding. But in this case, what it means is Chief Justice Roberts published an opinion that said what he was trying to do since the draft was leaked, which was get another justice, specifically Kavanaugh, to join him and the 3 liberal justices in upholding the Mississippi 15-week ban. And that, while still rescinding part of Roe, sort of, eroding at Roe, would most definitely have been the more proper thing to do here. The really shocking part about the majority opinion is that it completely flies in the face of a lot of Supreme Court jurisprudence, specifically the fact that if you can make a narrow opinion, you're supposed to. If you can avoid a constitutional question, you're supposed to. And what the majority did was not only invalidate a 50-year precedent, but they did it in a way where they didn't have to make that decision. The only question before them was whether or not Mississippi's 15-week ban was constitutional or not. They very easily could have simply said, yes, we think that Mississippi's ban is constitutional. We're getting rid of viability as the threshold for making abortion illegal, and we're going to move forward from there. To go all the way and say that there is no constitutional right to abortion is not the way that the Supreme Court is supposed to make decisions, and really underscores how incredibly politicized the Supreme Court has become, which is reflected in their polling for the Supreme Court. People who trust in it has fallen down to almost the rate of Congress, which is usually sub 20%. It's just not a,
which is wild.
But it's an institution that has undermined its credibility in a probably permanent way. So
that for some, this is slightly off topic, but it makes me think of in Bush v. Gore. If you've ever watched Al Gore's like a secession. Like what is the loser speech called? I forget.
Concession.
That's it.
Concession.
Not secession.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're still thinking of Texas.
Yeah.
And the
Anyway,
party platform.
and it's after the whole Supreme Court fight and everything, and he's emotional, and he was like, "This kills me to do this, but I respect the Supreme Court, and so I, like hand it off to Bush. He won and everything." But yeah, I mean, I remember I watched that speech during law school just to like, I don't know, get in the groove for studying for con law for whatever masochistic reason that I did that. But yeah, I mean, it was a powerful speech about the respect for the institution, but I doubt that's kind of emotional flair is ever going to be demonstrated again, at least in our lifetimes, for the institution.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. And Jenny was showing me, I guess in addition to the 13 trigger laws, that there are actually 21 states that have some other law that is either coming or will be enacted that's more than that, because the trigger laws for the 13 states are with regards to outright bans in the first and second trimester. There's other just sort of hostile laws that are going to come into effect that just expand onto that list. In the express desire to prohibit abortion entirely, these states and territories are extremely vulnerable to the revival of old abortion bans or the enactment of new ones, and none of them have legal protections for abortion at this time. So
I think Oklahoma actually had a trigger law that went into effect. It's like the harshest one.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma. Yep. Utah, Wyoming, Texas, Tennessee, of course, South Dakota, North Dakota, Missouri, Arkansas, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas.
Those are all the ones that have hostile law. So the ones who made it outright illegal. The ones that make it entirely illegal are Arkansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, and South Dakota. So reproductiverights.org gives you like up to the minute notifications about the changes that are happening state by state and what specifics are happening there.
Good deal. Thank you for that. So I wanted to dive a little bit into this. It was kind of riffing off of what RJ was talking about, sort of the this isn't how the SCOTUS normally does business, and that's sort of a big red flag. That this isn't just, oh, well, they just have a different, judicial philosophy than people on the left, and they just don't like that. It's not, this isn't like we're an agreeing to disagree thing here, that this is non-normative jurisprudence. This is some aberrant, weird shit that's basically agenda driven, right? That's what that indicates to me.
To cover that real fast, the two doctrines at play here are the doctrines of stare decisis, which means once there is a precedent set, stick with the precedent unless there's a really good reason not to, and the doctrine of judicial restraint, which is what I was referring to earlier. Only decide the case to the extent that the merits require you to. Don't go beyond that, and do not make a ruling from the Supreme Court about the Constitution unless there is no way to rule upon the case without invoking the Constitution. So gotcha. Those two things, the right has been for a long time against stare decisis because since the 1930s and the end of the Lochner Court, which is a totally different conversation, the general liberal ideology has won out more often than not in the courts. It's one of the reasons that since the late 1950s, the Republican Party has been so adamant about we need to win elections where we get to name people to different courts, federal courts, state courts, whatever, and why the Federalist Society has essentially created an industry of creating lists of approved conservative judges.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, but they came around in like, was it 1983 Federalist Society, and then basically every appointee from that day forward that was a Republican came from the Federalist Society. Like you have to be a Federalist Society shortlister to be nominated by a Republican president. That's basically the way it's been. I don't
Right.
think there's been an exception, from their recommendations. So like, this isn't just different, and we're as tempted as RJ and I are. I'm sure we're not going to have a conversation about originalism. We're not going to do it to you, Haley, that because I know you don't like that. But
Yeah, but
we're not
so-
going. Go ahead.
Myself for asking this question because I don't want to get into an originalism debate.
No.
But like, what about Marbury versus Madison? Like judicial review, like
judicial
Yeah.
review itself is not in the Constitution. It's hilarious the way that originalism undermines itself at every turn. In the majority opinion, it's harped on that abortion doesn't appear in the Constitution. It's like, of course, it doesn't appear in the Constitution.
oh
But
my god.
yes,
Where
it's like
does it? Yeah, where
the
does it
idea
say
of-
that? Where are the letters?
the idea of judicial review itself, that the Supreme Court can review legislation passed by a state or the federal government,
And strike it down as
rules,
unconstitutional.
and say it doesn't follow the Constitution, is not in the Constitution. It is from
No, the
1793,
Federalist Papers.
Marbury versus Madison.
No, that's I
Yeah.
thought it was 1803, the same year.
In
the
1803, yeah, okay,
Louisiana
I'm early.
Yeah.
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 1803 Marbury versus Madison, and it's based on Hamilton, I want to say, and the Federalist
I know,
Papers.
yeah.
I want to say it was 78. Create a in the idea, in the spirit of what the founders intended, with regards to the way our laws work. It's right there in the source document that they like to go to cite, original intent. So it is self-refuting. RJ and I could go down a big rabbit trail about that. We won't, but it's there. And the other thing about stare, it's like, and you know what they always damn say, well, what about Dred Scott? What about, there's one, decision or another that we may find morally objectionable. They say, oh, well, you're okay. So if you're just saying precedent's all that matters, aren't we supposed to be okay with this? Well, I mean, we know that's bullshit, right? That there are bad decisions, but stare decisis isn't everything, but it should have some weight. And when you have 5 decades across jurisdictions regarding various cases regarding this as a fundamental right, when it gets hammered out that thoroughly, it's part of the body of normative jurisprudence. It is the normal way of interpreting the law, and people have come in with a unique and highly motivated interpretation to give themselves the political outcome that they prefer. And that's all this is. It's not just a we disagree thing. Like this was about the culture wars, basically.
Yeah. And so what's interesting about the quandary that the court has placed itself in is that in the and Haley alluded to this earlier, but in Justice Thomas's concurring opinion, he said, and this is true, that the court has always placed abortion off to the side. It said this is in its own box, and it doesn't matter whether some of the rationale of any ruling that we've had on abortion may overlap with other areas of the law.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever we decide about abortion is going to be limited to abortion itself. Okay. But Justice Alito's opinion is rooted in an undermining of substantive due process rights under the 14th Amendment. Substantive due process rights have been, again, since the 1930s, have been expanded. We have found rights for people that we didn't acknowledge previously. What Justice Alito has done in the majority opinion is strongly signaled that his reading of the 14th Amendment is that substantive due process may exist, but if it exists only for things that would have been acknowledged at the time of ratification of the 14th Amendment, which was 1868. So some rights that have been acknowledged by substantive due process are things like gay marriage, the right to use contraception in a marriage, the right for gays to have sexual relations with one another, interracial marriage. Fucking none of those things would have been acknowledged in 1868. All right?
No.
In 1868, absolutely no one in society intended for those things to happen. Right?
Yeah.
So under Justice Alito's rationale, and what Justice Thomas in concurrence specifically invited was, let's bring challenges to everything that we've ever acknowledged under substantive due process. And use this same test to strike them down. That pretty much expressly puts, especially the more recent decisions like Obergefell, which is the right to gay marriage. He mentioned Griswold, which I think is really odd because the idea that the Supreme Court would strike down the right to use contraceptions, which was acknowledged in the early 70s before Roe, is odd to me, but it's there. And he also specifically called out the right for gays to have sexual relations.
Yeah.
So
just anything that's sodomy, right? Like not even just same sex.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can
relations.
It's very specific
Anal.
to same sex, but yes, it can be any sexual act that a legislature might want to say is illegal.
Essentially, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's everything that's not reproductive sex, right?
So
Or
oral
does-
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's considered sodomy.
Huh.
It's gonna get pretty boring around here.
It's like, sorry,
Very
that's illegal. It's illegal. We can't.
Anyway, as I noticed immediately, and it's been all over the place since then, as a lot of other people noticed it on their own, in Justice Thomas's list of substantive due process rights that should be challenged, he conveniently left out the Loving versus Virginia case, which is the case that acknowledged a fundamental constitutional right to have interracial marriage, and just so happens that he himself is in an interracial marriage, so that was convenient.
Well, and also that concurrence, like he cites to his previous concurrences as persuasive authority for all of this shit. So it's like
agreeing with himself from before as evidence.
Oh, he does that all the time.
What we should do.
Yeah, he what he really likes to do, what's much funnier, is when in dissent.
Isn't that like liking your own post on Facebook? Like, isn't that
yeah,
kind of
he's a Supreme Court justice.
like sharing? It's like sharing your own post on your own timeline.
No,
Yeah, but
that's like when he does it in dissent. When in dissent he references his other dissents, that's like liking your own post on Facebook, because it's just,
oh my god,
hey, look, here's something that doesn't have the force of law, but I'm going to talk about other things that don't have the force and effect of law either.
Fantastic.
Right. So that's the substantive due process side of this, and that's where the Justice Thomas concurrence is really interesting, because the majority simply disposes of all that by saying, well, we just put abortion in a box and you don't have to worry about anything else because nothing else is affected by this ruling.
Yeah, I mean, it was settled law after all, right?
Well, no, what I'm saying is this ruling itself
I know.
Doesn't affect anything else. It's not a striking down of substantive due process. It is simply a striking down of Roe versus Wade. And then Thomas decided to pull on that thread. And I'm surprised that nobody talked him out of it, because it's like, do you think that's like, again,
I think that's going to be good for us?
Right. Do you think that looks good in the public square?
No, I think to certain people, I think that's exactly what they want, because we know I don't believe there's a real political will to, overturn like Loving versus Virginia, right? But the precedent to do so is there if there was a political will. What they want is Obergefell. Like, to me, that's what they want, and possibly Griswold. But I think the big one that they want in the crosshairs because of this, there's no reason Obergefell should continue to be upheld so long as somebody comes up there with standing, and they give cert to a case that gives them the opportunity to do this. They can use the Dobbs decision as the precedent, right? Like precedent will start to count when it's what they want.
Well, they won't use this as precedent. They will refer to the rationale as already accepted by the Supreme Court, but it won't technically be precedential because, again, of the way the court sets off.
It sounds similar to me as a layperson, but I think I understand what you're saying.
It's similar, but it would not be an auto win. You wouldn't bring it up and be like, you already decided this case.
Right.
It would be, you have used this rationale in the past,
and now we're going to use it here.
You should use it in this sector as well.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to see if I could get you guys to address, because I've seen this, and this is more like, this isn't like a devil's advocate thing. It's like, it's a stupid argument, and I'm sick of seeing it. So I kind of wanted it like defense against the dark arts. Yeah, I want to kill it. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg was critical of the rationale under which Roe versus Wade was decided. And I see a lot of people who are supporting this overturn, basically using her corpse as a sock puppet to be like, hey, see, even Ginsburg would have been on the side of this one. Does somebody want to take that?
I mean, they're
Thoughts?
stupid.
I mean,
how
yes.
I don't understand how to address such a moronic comment. Like I don't.
Well, I do. They're actually correct in the sense that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a big proponent of the rights that were acknowledged by Roe, but she was critical of the rationale under which Roe was founded, and she said that it was a weakness that could be. But see, it didn't stop there. She had a case prior to Roe, it was like 1971, that she wanted to be the abortion case. And when I say she, I mean as a lawyer before she was on the Supreme Court. She wanted that to be the abortion case. And it was actually an anti-abortion case. It was a woman who was in the Air Force who got pregnant. At the time, the Air Force said, if you don't terminate your pregnancy, we terminate your employment with the Air Force. And this woman didn't have an abortion. 2 years later, while it was still being litigated, it was, I don't know if cert had been granted, but they were certainly going to apply for cert if they hadn't already. The Air Force rescinded its rule. And so
that is no longer standing. Yeah.
But she wasn't challenging this under some penumbral right to privacy. What she said is, this is equal protection, 14th and 5th Amendment. And equal protection under the law is much more founded in the Constitution itself, and wouldn't be subject to something like a rationale of, well, this should only acknowledge equal protection that would have been acknowledged in 1868, because equal protection under the law specifically refers to sex/gender, and it probably wouldn't have been as, I shouldn't say it was easy to overturn. I mean, it did last for 50 years. The rationale to overturn it would have had to have been completely different.
Yeah.
So people who were trying to say that she would have been in favor of this, no, she obviously wouldn't have been. She argued, she talked about the rights that are that were granted by Roe and rescinded by Dobbs as being fundamental, as being important to equality between men and women. But the fact does remain that she would have preferred having the idea of Roe not founded in the penumbral rights of the 5th and 14th Amendment, substantive due process, but rather equal protection.
Yeah. So thank you. You said the thing I needed, because I cannot stand the way I've seen this. So I was like, if you actually look at what she says about Roe and the way it was decided, it's not like she thought it was decided. Actually, thought it was decided poorly. She thought it would have been a stronger decision to come under equal protections, that, it's basically sex discrimination, rather than what is essentially creating provision for doctors to practice this kind of thing. And it's more about the doctors than the people who might be seeking an abortion. So to me, this is like, I came up with an analogy in my head. This would be like Rosa Parks being opposed to like Brown versus Board because she didn't like the way, the constitutional principle based on which it was decided. Like, she would have been an opponent of it, and if it got overthrown, she'd be like, yeah, that was great because it was poorly decided. Bullshit. We know that's not true, but it's to me, they seem analogous. Daniel, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I was having technical difficulties, so sorry for joining so late.
No, it's okay.
I feel like the justification for Roe wouldn't matter either way with the court. I feel like this is the old battle we've been having versus, federalism versus state rights. And there's been people who's been trying to push us back toward a state right country where you have strong states, strong corporations that are independent of the federal government and can do as they please. And there are forces in America that's been always pushing for that. And they feel like a lot of these new amendments to the constitutions, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, all these amendments kind of, pushing us back to when the country was greatest, where you had states deciding on whom were people or whom were product or what women can do and cannot do, uh, what member of society is considered a citizen. They want to take us back to that time where the majority mm, can decide what to do with the minority in any way they wishes.
Yeah, it kind of wants to revert to the tyranny of local majorities, right? When you have
Right,
these
right,
very red
right,
states to decide whether or not some of its citizens have fundamental rights or not. You know,
right.
and
And
it's the
that's what
whole
they've been
10th Amendment
attacking the 14th.
versus federalism kind of debate that's been, fought a civil war over. And, it still comes back to states' rights to do what? Well, we see, because we've got
Right.
13 states with trigger
Yeah.
laws and another half dozen with other laws that are hostile to people who basically can abortion. Warren, I'm gonna bring Warren back in here. I don't know, Warren. You can't bring yourself back in, can you? Because you were probably sitting in the waiting room there for a while.
Brother Warren,
He's muted.
I think he's muted. Yeah, I don't
No.
think he-
Can you hear me now?
I can. Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
I sorry, I switched from my personal my phone to.
No, that's fine. Yeah, but I noticed when you popped yourself out, I was like, oh, he can't. He probably doesn't know how to tell me when he needs to come back in. So I just thought if you need to mute yourself or whatever in the meantime, but just kind of stay in the call, stay forward.
Thanks.
But anyway, so here we are now. I do think that Obergefell is probably going to be the next one to go, like RJ and I were talking about earlier. But I guess before we get into that, in terms of recourse right now, if you're living in one of these states, don't forget it is currently and hopefully will remain not illegal to travel to a state where abortion is legal to get an abortion. I saw there was a speech by President Biden. I guess it came out a few hours after the decision, kind of reinforcing and reminding that you have. And again, it is a somewhat privileged statement. Not everyone has the means or wherewithal to get themselves to a place where abortion is legal if they need one. But the option does technically still exist. And if you do need help, there are resources out there. There are people that want to help you. You've seen probably several dozen posts about people talking about, offering to help you go on a camping trip and then never talk about the camping trip. Obviously that's a nod to helping to get you somewhere where you can get access to the healthcare that you need. I'll circle back around to it because I don't have it in front of me, but there's some resources with regards to that sort of thing, and also other ways to get involved. Janie here she's gonna pull it up here in a minute. Yeah, it's
I mean,
pretty bad shape.
the quickest way, if for people that wanna, the ACLU is bringing up a bunch of cases at the state level to the state Supreme Court to challenge a lot of these laws that are on the book. A lot of them are not constitutional per state constitutions. So that's a legal course that's happening right now. But you're right. In the meantime, there are women that are being denied, health care because of this insanity of the Supreme Court. And I see a lot of I have a lot of Christian friends who are happy about this, but now realizing eventually we're gonna end up with an amendment to the Constitution protecting body autonomy, because it's gonna get to the point where it's almost like the Slave Fugitive Act, where you literally had, because women gonna be running across state lines to get health care, and the legal regime you're gonna need to chase these women or prosecute these women as they go out of state, and to prosecute the healthcare provider they receive from out of state. It's going to create another situation with the Slave Fugitive Act, where literally you're going to have these states fighting each other, and eventually we're going to have to end up with an amendment to the Constitution protecting body autonomy. So I tell all my Christian friends right now that are happy about this ruling, eventually we're just going to end up with the Constitutions of equal protection under the law, as as we try to pass back in the, when was it, the Equal Amendment Act was trying to be passed, and
I'm not sure what year. I guess that.
But
go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think that's what's gonna end up happening with as this messiness become more real in people's lives. We have women running across state lines to get health care, it's gonna be insane. It's gonna be worse than the prohibition against alcohol. Where almost like the Slave Fugitive Act. It's giving me that vibe.
Yeah, for sure. I'm thinking, I know in Tennessee, for example, I think they're already, I don't know if they've already succeeded in doing it, but sending someone Plan B in the mail, they're working on making that illegal. You could thank Marsha Blackburn for that one. The wonderful human being that she is. And to your point, I could see that as like the most ideal outcome, that there's like a constitutional amendment that protects bodily autonomy regarding issues like this. The likelihood of seeing that happen, given the state of our legislature, like our national legislature, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So for that to be a thing, we would have to have a super majority, basically, right? We would have to be, unless we're going to get rid of the filibuster, which is also not a thing currently. So what would need to happen is an enormous blue wave. And now maybe I haven't really read the tea leaves on this one to feel where people are really at and seen the polling and stuff like that. Unless there is that kind of change coming either this fall or in 24, like we will never see that, because you have to have enough to pass something with zero Republican support. And you can't forget that like Sinema and Manchin are useless when it comes to things like this. So you would not be able to rely on them or their votes. You would have to have enough to overcome everything, basically, to see something like that pass. I just don't see it as super likely, at least not right now. But again, things could be changing. People are super angry. There were protests the same day at state capitals that this passed. Like, people are super pissed off. I mean, you basically made half the country second-class citizens. I mean, people are real damn mad about it. But what happens, it is way too soon for me to be able to tell.
I want to jump on that real fast and just express, because in case it was not obvious, my pronouns are he, him. I cannot give birth. This doesn't affect me directly in immediate direct fashion. And I think that that's why it's so important. I've been reading a lot of different women's takes on this. The New York Times has convened a number of panels, which have been really interesting to read. Obviously, Twitter being open source, essentially, there are a lot of different voices out there. From my perspective, taking aside the second-class citizen idea, the most disappointing thing to me is that it feels to me like this undermines the entire idea of the legal profession, at least in America. To have something where so many people, they look at lawyers, they say, "Oh, you went to law school, you got a JD, good for you." This idea that justice is supposed to be blind, that we're supposed to come to things and say, how are we going to make the best decision for everybody out of the situation? And to have something that it's not essential, it just is the product of 50-ish years of direct and concerted political opportunism and directed activity on the part of the right wing, to overturn something that is fundamentally not just a right, but popular. This isn't desegregating the schools. A lot of people didn't want to desegregate the schools at the time that happened. The court had to step in and do something about that until, today I was having a conversation with someone who said, like, well, I mean, I think that stuff like, racism, where everybody just kind of agrees on it, that should be okay to have a federal law about. The more contentious thing should be to the states. And I was like, do you think that at the time of Brown versus Board of Education, that everybody just was, holding hands and singing Kumbaya? Like, they're right.
Insane.
You're just attaching a 2022 vision to 1954, and it's not the way that the world works. But this is a nakedly political act, and it's something that has been a concerted effort of the right wing since Roe versus Wade went into effect. And the fact that it was successful is devastating to the propriety of the legal profession. The Supreme Court we already talked about, but I'm just saying, the idea of the law in ordinary people's minds is undermined by this decision.
Absolutely.
I mean, I
go ahead,
don't want
Dan.
to make this about a race thing, but it is something Black people have known for centuries, right? The laws, the legal system was designed, was instituted to benefit, a few, right? It's the legal system. It is a tool of the powerful, right? It's a means to justify injustice, right? It's kind of like, to make it sound all special, and this song and dance we do in front of a judge to justify, someone going to jail, when we know if you have money, you can buy your way out of justice, right? Well, I've used the example where Jeff Bezos can literally rape my wife and get away with it because he's a billionaire, right? The law will not be able to touch him, right? Because he has the mean and he was to drag it out forever, where my wife and I will never receive justice, right? We know it is a tool of the powerful to justify injustice, right? This blatant for, maybe have the population to realize, the law, legalism, it's a scheme, right? It's a pyramid scheme to justify, denying justice to people. Where that's gonna wake a lot of people up, to the charade, and really, really finally implement a system of true justice for people, right? Because it's been blatant. It's been blatant because the justice system was used to put people like me in chain and justify it for centuries, and then we had to use it to kind of, walk away from that, not because of morality. It's because the rest of the world were laughing at us, right? They thought we were backward, that we still had our citizens in chains, right? So we did it as a mean to kind of save face, not really as a moral, action, right, for justice. It was as a mean to save face in the world, as we're trying to be a member of the rest of the nation.
The international community. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, we are ever the embarrassment. It's some of the, of course, there's lots of memes, and some of them are trying to make, try to get a laugh in a dark place kind of thing. So it's like, people being upset that this is who we are. And I saw a meme of it was actually Dave Chappelle, and kind of just like looking like he's looking at the camera, like, really, you didn't think this is who we are? Like, yeah, this is absolutely who we are. Like, we don't do the right thing because it's the moral thing. There's always some level of expediency that's going to have to be behind it. Yeah. And moving forward, and I have to say this too, because, and I know RJ and Haley and I, we were talking before about some of our, I don't mean it in an overly pejorative way, but like leftist friends who like to argue. And I had a guy on my podcast, I think it's part of the 2020 election, who was in a swing state, and he's like, oh, well, if I can't get Bernie, I'm just going to vote for some one-off character who's got no chance of becoming president. Like, this is why elections matter. This is why I just didn't like Hillary. That's why
butter emails.
Butter emails, like, Hillary's gross, she's mean, I don't like her. Like, this is a direct result of that. The rat fucking of the Garland appointment, and these other Supreme Court appointments. They got what they wanted. All of the people who didn't really like Trump as a human being, but held their nose and voted for him, they did it for this, and they got what they wanted. Okay. And that's something to remember as the midterms are coming and as 2024 is coming up, that like they were rewarded for their commitment to somebody that maybe they didn't love. And that's going to continue to motivate support from people, again, who were maybe not on board with the more odious characteristics of someone like Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whoever ends up being the front running candidate for the Republicans, because it's going to be more of this. That's what they want. It's been proven to them that the deal works, and we're sitting here, holding our guts in our hands and saying we have to do so much better than this. And to the leftists, like, this is what, when you say Democrats and Republican are the same, I would really hope that Friday proved that wrong in the most conclusive way possible. This is what happens even if you don't really love. And you guys all know we went through how many primary debates together and covered all of those back in 2020. Joe Biden was not the first choice for any of us, right? He wasn't. I don't think he was even the 7th choice for me. Like, it just doesn't matter because the alternative is so much worse. I will vote for a ham sandwich running as a Democrat over pretty much any Republican at this point because a ham sandwich can't do any harm really, versus the active harm that's happened with these Supreme Court appointments. That's the big enchilada, and they got it. And that's my soapbox about that. In the meantime, we all have to get involved. We all have to do things. I know some people came here because they wanted to vent or just kind of talk about it. And I do like to get into the sort of the legalese and kind of understanding, what happened and how all this works and what to expect moving forward. But like, if we don't do more than talk about it, if we don't do things, it's not going to matter. And more of these decisions are just going to keep coming.
I mean, this has been a long-term project with them. I want to, again, I feel like we need to recognize the situation, champion them for what they did in a way like, good job. Because this has been a multi-decade project for them, right?
We need to pat them on the back for oppressing people. What we need to do is remind every
No.
woman
On
that
their
we
strategy.
know. Sure, we need to
Learn
do is
from
remind
them.
every single woman we know who's of childbearing years right now to delete their period tracking apps because that data is not private. And to the extent that you can do anything yourself, we're all individual people. Just like keep your own space as safe and open as it can be, because this time is going to be hard for women. As someone who recently chose to go through childbirth, there's so much shit that can go wrong during the process, and there is so much stuff that happens to your body. I got diabetes during it. My son is currently 2 months old, and before we started this show too, I had to stick a whistle up his ass to get him to fart and everything. It's taking care of a kid is hard. Not everyone can do it. And so what I'm doing, I no longer live in America right now, so I do feel a little bit helpless. And I'm also I don't have to deal with the mental toll of the news right now. I'm depressed and I barely get exposed to this news because Sweden's news is super just like America overturned abortion. It's not partisan. It's government funded news. Crazy socialism over here. But yeah, it's just like, America did this. They don't really dwell on it. And then it goes on to like a serious debate about the upcoming weather. That's like the only thing that's debated on the news here. But I mean, what I plan on doing is reminding all of my girlfriends to delete period tracking apps, to be vigilant of that kind of stuff, and to try to make sure that I am building up a safe space for people to talk to, if they're ever going through shit. Because if you don't know a woman who has had an abortion, that just means you're the type of person that women don't feel safe confiding in. Right. So women who've had abortions. And I just hope that I can continue to be a person who people can either turn to during a difficult time, and hopefully I can build up my farm space and be a literal refugee for Americans. But that's my soapbox spiel. And no, I won't be patting any Republicans on the back for accomplishing this bullshit.
You gotta respect
bent over. Scold.
No. They committed to a multi-decade strategy, and I think we can learn from that. This is what I mean.
Sure.
You gotta respect your enemy. You gotta respect your enemy and their strategy, and learn from them. Because until you recognize what they're capable of and truly what committed to be doing,
and I respect
then
them.
you will not adapt and change.
To delete their period tracking apps. No, they're not.
That's the first start. That's the first start.
Maybe a less triggering word would be to say you can appreciate their strategy rather than respect their strategy. Because I don't respect anything about what's happening. Again, can I appreciate the effort?
Cool. Right. It's cool, but
I can acknowledge that they won, and I know that they're a tough opponent.
Right. Understand what I'm trying to say.
Build up your safe spaces.
Right. Understand what I'm trying to say. That way we need to commit to a multi-decade to build the foundations, to put people into places, to put ideas out there, to slowly build a bench of lawyers and judges So when the opportunity come for them to put their people on the Supreme Court and do this, they were in place. We need to start with the same mindset. Build the benches, build the legal expertise, putting people in places so that we can really bring in 100 years, 1,000 years of progressivism in the same way that they were committed to lay down the foundations to overturn this ruling. I feel like progress is really hard. The status quo is really easy to
and you're right. We do have to keep that in mind. But I also think that right now, women are going to die from this within the next year. So I agree. We need to vote every November, and you need to vote with that in mind. But in the immediate interim, create a safe space for especially your child, women who are in their childbearing years. So,
Absolutely.
which is, around age 11 for some, or younger for some girls, up to, their 50s. So, pretty big swath of the population. And get vasectomies.
And everybody, if you're going to start,
if you don't want any more kids, get some fucking vasectomies. Step up.
yeah, you guys have seen my statement.
Every women right now. If you're not
You guys
married,
have seen. You guys have, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Haji.
All right. So you guys have seen my whole statement in the garbage of the fact that, if they really wanted to do that, they could just have every boy get vasectomies at puberty and then turn them back the other way when they want to have kids.
I'm getting a vasectomy, by the way. I want to announce that, really, like,
like
a virtue sign,
which would make a good point. The other thing is everybody needs to look, especially in your local areas and the local friends, and try to figure out which people, because in this area right here in New York, because we're close enough to Ohio, who had one of those laws, there are already groups that are already creating essentially bus pools that will bring people from
states like ours,
to Cleveland, Akron, and Massillon or whatever, which is basically to bring people from that area over to New York so that they would be able to get their treatment, including the fact that they are sending, there are doctors over here that are dedicating time to actually go on the bus so that they can go to that area and give that mandatory medical meeting prior to the surgery, prior to the thing. So they're going out there to do that meeting so that then later they only have to make the one trip to actually get things done. Unfortunately, that's the world we're in, where everybody's got to kind of look and see who is what you can do. That's my immediate step. My immediate step is making sure that anybody who needs one can get one via the states that will continue to have it.
Yeah, and if the resources
whole
available.
Idea of pushing past that, it's great and all, but if you can't agree on a simple topic, which apparently we can't on the left the way they can on the right, it's a lot easier to motivate through hate than it is to motivate through love.
Yeah. And Daniel, in the comments, Daniel put in the private chat, women of America should boycott sex until this ruling is overturned. Yeah, if you shouldn't be having sex with people if you were worried about becoming pregnant and not being able to do anything about it. And you should also just not have sex with conservatives in general, because they're going to continue to vote this way. Against your rights.
Yeah, Liz Estrada. The Liz Estrada strategy.
I was just going to say that, it's for people who have the means and aren't sure what to do. Donating to abortion funds is a really great strategy to make sure that women who need abortions or need that health care afterwards have access. Abortion funds will, pay for you to get that medical care, pay for child care for you while you're recovering from that process, pay for you to have support people go with you through that process. And then I think those people who think we should be forced to be incubators should go ahead and get in line to adopt all the children that we can't afford to raise. Well, I think about the family members I've had who dig through their couches to buy diapers and formula.
I mailed some formula to the United States. I did do that.
Thanks, Haley.
The irony of this moment, when we have a formula shortage is just, chef's kiss, right?
I can just remember family members of mine who couldn't afford to get abortions, who then also couldn't afford to feed the child, but had no other alternative. So they literally were digging nickels out of the couch to feed the child. So I hope everyone who thinks that should be a reality should go out there and get ready to adopt all these babies.
Yeah. And that's the thing too.
People have been funding the foster care system and along those lines. So of course they're not going to.
Which is already. I mean, it's already outstripped the foster care system because the reality is, you can just give your baby up for adopt. So
I actually don't know if this is in the current opinion, but there was this part of the Alito opinion talked about the lack of newborn infants on the free market of adoption, the shortage.
White babies.
White newborns. Yep. Not white newborns. They are a premium, man. You got to get on a waiting list if you want one of them. Everybody else, they're not really getting adopted so much. It's funny how that happens. So I don't know because I've personally spent my career working with people who came up in the foster care system and nobody wanted because they had disabilities. Like literally nobody wanted, and we get them by the time they're teenagers and their behavior is out of control. Like it's really poor life outcomes are often expected without the proper supports. And it's not that those people don't ever get them or that they shouldn't be there, but we are about to see an already outstripped system get so overloaded with a spike in birth rates of unwanted children. It's going to be real damn gross.
It's already been gross, and I feel like this is where I think this might backfires on conservative or whoever is sharing for this ruling, because they feel like they won, which kind of demotivate them to show up for the next election, right? Because they got what they want, so they're just gonna
I don't know if I agree with that.
Again, it's a theory, right? So it's a theory. It's almost like
they'll get complacent. I don't think so.
Right?
Because they're going to say it's all of us leftists because we're all leftists to them.
Now
that we're gonna take it back if they don't keep going. They're a
I mean, that's doing the exact opposite of respecting their strategy. No, they're not going to get complacent. They're going to keep
driving.
They vote in lockstep.
Marriage equality, sodomy, right to contraceptives, all of that stuff, like all the Gilead shit, like that's all what they want, and they got the first thing. They're going to go take the next thing now.
To the point of it being in Clarence Thomas's write-up was the fact that that's the next step is those things.
Yeah.
Right. But that's
which by the way, the weird thing about Clarence Thomas talking about all of those things to include gay marriage is the fact that the ruling that made it for gay marriage is the same ruling that enabled him to be married to a white woman.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier.
He's not worried about that one.
Clarence Thomas he's a traditional black supremacist mindset. Not really a mindset, because there was a wonderful autobiography written about this man. His mindset is he does believe integrated America is bad for black people. He did believe that segregation in a way helped black America because it allowed us to focus on our own people, where we had to become more interdependent of each other. So it's a weird philosophy. But in a way, all people.
His actual point is not that it helped black people; it's that it helped black business.
Right. Again,
he really only cares about businesses, whether they are black or white or anything else.
Right. Where you have to understand these people's psychology in a way. Some of them do believe segregation was good for America when it existed. And that's why they want to take us back to that time. And that's why they're attacking the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 19th, all these amendments, because they do believe if we have segregation, it will benefit the country, because as people of different tribes, sex, whatever, will become more interdependent on ourselves to succeed instead of depending on the federal government, to make it easier for us. It is a weird psychology, and I feel like we need to understand that mindset.
But the number one part of that factor, doesn't have to do with us being independently better for each other. It has to do with the fact that they want all of us to be separated. It's not a matter of success. It's not a matter of whether or not you will be better as Black people if you are segregated. It's you will be segregated, and therefore me as white will be better.
Right. Again, we have to understand that psychology to really, well, philosophy, psychology, whatever, to really, really attack it. Because I feel like making Thomas this avatar of this sellout man does not benefit us. Does not benefit us because he's part of a movement of segregation.
No, but it's accurate.
Well, he's not really this
his philosophy. Avatar. His philosophy and his actions are him as a sellout, because his philosophy and opinions are what sellout being is. It still doesn't matter whether or not he has a philosophy about it. That's like me saying that I should understand the philosophy of David Duke so that I can talk about him.
We lost that whole last part of that sentence, sir.
Right. They're all Black.
And we lost Daniel.
They happen to be Black and they're conservative. Doesn't mean they're Uncle Tom. We have to be careful with turning people into these avatar, and these strawmen to attack them. Where it is more beneficial to us if we understand the idea and philosophy behind it and attack those ideas. Right.
The only thing that's wrong with the only thing that's wrong with calling him as an Uncle Tom is people don't understand who Uncle Tom actually was. So. He is a sellout. He is a class racist, as in he cares more about class than he does race. He just lumps people into that one group. But the simple fact of the matter, classist, but that it doesn't matter about labeling the avatar or doing whatever if you aren't doing all the steps on the opposite side to make sure that they don't have the effect that they have. I get your point. Right. You want to put their philosophy in there, but I don't need to know the philosophy of a racist to know that he's racist, nor do I need the philosophy of a classist to know that he's classist, nor do I need to know the philosophy of a misogynist to know he's a misogynist. Got it. All of his actions lead out to the same constructive opinion. This is a man that is against affirmative action, but went to college on an affirmative action program. This is a man that is against interracial marriages who's in an interracial marriage. Like the simple fact of the matter is there's nothing that is a value of his that does not have to do with his class and his idea economically of people being separated. Got it. He's in it for himself and for the things that he's gotten.
Yeah. I'll resist the hot take. I actually want to pivot real quick. RJ, you posted something in the private chat. I think it would be really good if you wanted to read that regarding the adoption experiences with regards to demand.
Oh yeah. So we were talking about this, and Haley was wondering if it made the final opinion, and I just checked, and it did. The idea here is that the majority opinion is attempting to justify its position based on the fact that women can always just adopt their kids out. I'm talking about you, Haley. And this was apparently a contribution of Justice Barrett to the majority opinion, but it's this idea that, and I'll just read the quote and then say what it means. A woman who puts her newborn up for adoption today has little reason to fear the baby will not find a suitable home. See a CDC study. Nearly 1 million women were seeking to adopt children in 2002, meaning they were in demand for a child, whereas the domestic supply of infants relinquished at birth or within the first month of life and available to be adopted had become virtually non-existent. So this is a really odd justification to appear in a Supreme Court opinion, because it doesn't matter. This is begging the question. This is saying, hey, I assume that one of the reasons that people have abortions is because they're afraid that if they brought the baby to term and then gave it up for adoption, that it would be, put in some home, like a state home, little
orphanage,
or that
other institution,
or that they would end up in some place that would be bad for them as children. That's literally the fallacy of begging the question. You've put the your answer, your result into your assumption, and then just made a circular argument. I don't know that this even matters, but the idea that the majority thinks that this speaks in favor of fewer abortions, less control over bodily autonomy by women, because we can take their bodily autonomy away as long as we have somewhere to put the baby in the end, is insanity. It makes no sense. It especially doesn't make any
sense.
From
a rights perspective, it shouldn't be considered.
From the perspective of particularly forced birth, because bodily autonomy is important, and it's obviously the fundamental right that we're mostly talking about when we talk about abortion. But forced birth is the thing that people should be talking about more. As Haley can tell you, very recently, birth is a big deal. Carrying a child to term is a big deal. It is one of the most traumatic experiences that a woman can go through physically. It's something that historically has been a major killer of women. It's one of the reasons that women's life expectancies were so low for so many centuries. And it's especially ironic in a place like America, where our maternal death rate is so much higher than the rest of the wealthy world.
Well, and also,
I just find it amazing that they put this in there.
America doesn't have universal health care.
Right.
Like, I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes while I was pregnant. And, had I not been able to control it with diet, I would have had to get insulin. And the main risk with gestational diabetes is that you have so much sugar in your blood, you have a huge baby that just blows out your body. And, I don't know, you didn't have universal health care. Like, when I got diagnosed in Sweden, they immediately gave me a blood monitor and a diet plan. I had monthly meetings with a dietitian who I ended up scaring, apparently, because I sound really aggressive and did way too much research about what I did. But regardless, I had that resource as an access point. Felix was small, but I didn't eat cake for my entire third trimester.
Damn it.
Sounds like bullshit to me.
It was hard. It was fucking hard to deal with. I had expectations about being pregnant that were not met. But I mean, would that have been caught in America? Because the healthcare system there, it's like, especially if you're low income. And two, would you have been given like a blood test kit for free day of, meet with with someone who a diabetic specialist, within a couple of days, and have monthly meetings with a dietitian who you might scare, but it doesn't matter. No, that wouldn't have happened in America. And I don't know.
Yeah. Well, in America, you have to pull your pregnant self up by your bootstraps and really embrace your rugged individualism at that moment.
And
rugged individualism.
I just
give birth by you bite onto a tree branch and out in the field somewhere, and then you just get back to work. That's how we do it in America.
Yeah. I mean, I know that RJ and David know the answer to this, but no, Janie, guess how much it cost me to have a child in Sweden?
Ooh, I don't know. I can tell you what it cost me.
What did it cost?
Just over 10 grand.
Guess what it cost me?
I'm going with zero.
It was $22. I was in the hospital for 2 days, and that was $11 a day for food.
I'm just letting this silence permeate after you saying that. Just Just breathe it in.
The meal
Yep.
plans weren't included in my universal health care. So
So you had to pay for the hospital food.
also they didn't have diabetic friendly food. So I actually sent Matthias to the apartment to bring back, because I still had diabetes for a few days after giving birth, which I also thought sucked because I brought a fuckload of candy with me to the hospital. And I didn't get to eat any of it. Anyway, I think I told you all about that too. I was like building up a hospital bag.
Yeah, you said you cried because you had a bag full of candy and you couldn't eat any of it.
Yeah, I did.
And that's not to mock you for crying, but like I could understand being that upset. Like being ready with the candy, be like, I'm be in this hospital bed, I'm gonna eat this
and
candy.
the other thing is,
and then, beat us.
The other thing is, like, I have access to Finland really easily, and I don't know if y'all know this, but Finland makes amazing candy. It's like the best candy I've ever eaten. I don't know what Finland does, but I'm buying all their shit. And I had a bag full of Finnish candy, and I didn't get to eat it.
Candy and Molotovs.
Yeah.
Finland's claim to fame. Yeah,
you know what? They're really
most people think that's a Russian thing, right? I know we all talk about it in the chat, but most people think the Molotov cocktail is a Russian thing. It's Finnish.
It's not.
But anyway. So I wanted to mention, and they're not in currently, but I'm gonna add these to like the show notes, some of the resources that we had talked about. Like this is more than just like, yeah, absolutely be angry if you need to be angry in a non-public space, right? Where you were safe around other people, do that.
Or publicly.
If you want to show your damn ass, I'm here to give you a platform for it. Please do. But in the meantime, are there other things that you can do? And I shared this post, and like I said, I'll add it to the show notes. But reproductiverights.org, they have a map that'll show you kind of what laws are going to be in effect in what states, so that you know whether or not you have a fundamental right to healthcare and privacy where you live, or where you need to go to be able to have that.
But it talks about more than that. It talks about whether or not the ban is by method, by reason, like how it's imposed in that state. Like, is one way okay, but another one not? Can I have, medication mailed to me that I can have my abortion at home without medical assistance? All of that tells you state by state on there.
Yeah. You can also keep an eye on what state legislatures are doing, because again, your rights will now vary wildly from state to state, depending on where you are. In Tennessee, that's capitaltn.gov to find out which pretty much that slate of legislation every year is a non-hyperbolic parade of horribles. It's always, just because there's a Republican supermajority, it's always just a giant steaming pile of right-wing garbage. Basically, it is the worst stuff that you can expect. Tends to dominate the legislature. It's not true in every state. So you can look at congress.gov and then at / state legislatures, and you can go state by state and find out what they're doing state by state, either to protect your rights or help make sure that you don't have them. Let me see here.
There's that.
There is through actblue.com. There's for supporting abortion fund will help provide assistance to other people who are basically seeking out abortion in states where it's legal, and that includes travel and things like that for people who are coming from states like Tennessee or Texas that are terrible. With regards to, let me see here, at Rally Starter, you can link up with other folks who are interested in rallying and engaging in sort of public political demonstration.
Or if you want to start your own and you've never done that before, it will walk you step by step through how to do that for free.
There you go. And then there is, I'm not actually as familiar with this one. Basically writing to your legislature through your legislators, local to your state or district, through the Harkins Institute.
No, that's just a template.
Oh,
I made a big Facebook post. I have real feelings about people ranting on social media and not talking anything about what can actually be done. So
give money, vote, register people to vote, get involved. You can't, this is like a not talk about it. This is a be about it kind of thing. Because talking about what a bunch of jackasses the SCOTUS are and the right wing political machine and the pundits and all the worthless hot takes and all this other stuff and fighting with people on social media, none of that is going to change anything. That will be, if you got to vent, if you've got to rage out at somebody, I understand. I look at that as part of self-care if you really need to do it, but understand it's not going to make this better. We have to, and this is kind of like the ground zero, obviously not just, my podcast or any of us talking here, but like just as a society, if we want to fix this and fight back and make things better, like it's going to take real skin in the game beyond this. Like it means all of us getting up off of our asses and getting involved in political campaigns and everything else that we can do. And in states like mine, it is probably still a doomed proposition, more likely than not, but fight every damn fight. You can't roll over because this is what happens. This is where we end up. Anything else you wanted to add?
The only thing I really couldn't find, because of my career path, I'm hyper focused on resources. What I can't find is anyone who is offering or pushing for mental health care support for those who are going to, become incubators for children that they weren't planning on having and didn't have an interest in continuing that pregnancy. Where's their mental health support? But for the women who will eventually give up babies that they would not have otherwise had, where's the mental health support for that? Because it's not just over when they hand off their baby. I know a lot of women who have given up children who they, got pregnant very young. Their life is thankfully in a successful place for them right now, which would maybe not have happened if they had to raise a child from the age of 14. But, they carry scars from that. And no one's talking about who's going to fix those scars. So we're just going to have a broken mental health care system and then add to it with women we're not going to support. So if anyone has any resources that they're aware of that will help with that,
please reach out. Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any final thoughts from anybody on this super just uplifting and cheerful celebration? Dead silence.
I would bring my baby up, but he's sleeping. But I could,
yeah.
so like
You
say that it's like, I could show you my new baby.
Yeah.
But he's sleeping and I'm not going to do that.
No.
You're not going to do that to yourself.
But I mean, he's sleeping. I don't ever wake him up whenever he's sleeping. So
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. You made an adorable baby. You did.
He is cute. He's cute.
Even if RJ tries to take credit.
Fine.
So she posted a video. We have this little private chat between the three of us. And her and her husband, Matthias, I'm like, y'all made an adorable baby. And RJ's like, thank you.
Yeah. No, that was a good point that Janie just made of that's a good resource because I have a feeling there's going to be a very greatly increased need for that kind of resource. So something to actually look into. Yeah. Like that's something that's now I'm penciling in. Oh, I should look into that. Ask around.
Definitely.
I mean, it's the existing mental health care resources that are out there for low income folks are already exhausted. There's nothing left to give. So
sure. I know some family law attorneys though, so I could just ask them if they have any idea. They might not though. So.
Well, very good. Probably a good time to wrap it. We're going to end the live show here. If people feel like continuing to hang out and chat for a little bit, you guys are more than welcome to. I really appreciate everybody who came on and participated. Dark days, I'm not the optimist anyway, and putting a shiny bow on it. But at there has to be energy. There has to be momentum. Even if we don't like it, even if we're tired, even if we're all sick and tired of politics because of the Trump era and all the idiocy and all of the noise. This is what matters more than anything else. If there's a time for a whether you consider yourself a Democrat or just anybody on the left or just anybody who cares about a person's ability to govern their own body, this is the time to become a single issue voter. This is it moving forward. There really should be nothing else. As Daniel kind of pointed out, you take a page from our political enemies in this regard. That whatever else that they may not have liked, they held their nose and they got what they wanted. We will never achieve the same if we're not willing to do that. So please take all the time you need to absorb that, but do the right damn thing when it matters. That said, I'm going to end it here. If you guys are watching now, you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. There is an RSS feed for iTunes and Beyond Pod for the show, Fermenting Opinions. The conversation will continue because this is certainly not the end. This is the beginning of a very dark political era, probably. So there's going to be a lot more to talk about. Thank you all. Take care of yourselves. Be well.